Caitlin Clark hype is real, but a statistic that we saw on X is not. Clark's Indiana Fever jersey did sell out, but more than every single Dallas Cowboy all of last season. Basketball writer Dick Weiss posted that more Caitlin Clark Indiana Fever jerseys were sold in one day than the Cowboys sold last year for the entire team.
You've probably heard of overnight sensations before, but this story is on a completely different level. Imagine this. In just 24 hours, one basketball player's jersey sold more than the entire Dallas Cowboys roster sells in a whole season. That's America's most valuable sports franchise, the so-called kings of football, and they got outshined in a single day by one rookie. Let that sink in. We're not talking about a veteran legend with championships under her belt, not someone with a decades-long career and endorsement deals stacked to the ceiling. We're talking about a newcomer, a rookie who walked into the professional league and instantly turned it upside down. Her name is Caitlin Clark, and she's not just another talented athlete. She's become a cultural earthquake, the kind of figure who changes everything the second she steps onto the court. She's selling out arenas, she's spiking TV ratings, and she's sparking debates that go far beyond sports. In fact, she's single-handedly rewriting the rules of value and popularity in women's basketball, maybe even in professional sports altogether. But here's where the story takes a shocking twist. While Clark is generating headlines, breaking records, and becoming the face of an entire league, her official paycheck looks more like something you'd expect from an entry-level office job. Forget superstar money. We're talking about a salary that wouldn't even cover rent in most major cities. How can that be? How can the most marketable, most influential, and most talked about player in women's basketball be making less than what some interns in corporate America take home in a year? This isn't just an oversight. It isn't just how the system works. What you're about to see is a story of imbalance so extreme, so outrageous, that it's exposing cracks in the very foundation of the league itself. This isn't just about Caitlin Clark. This is a story about a contract that reveals a broken system. A system flashing bright red warnings. And if you think this is simply another story about an underpaid athlete, you're dead wrong. This is the story the league doesn't want you to know. A story about power, panic, and how the WNBA's brightest star may have accidentally become the trigger for its own destruction. To really understand the scale of this imbalance, you have to look past the highlights and focus on the numbers. Not the points or assists, but the cold, hard cash, the numbers the league hopes you never connect. In 2025, Caitlin Clark's official WNBA salary is locked in at just $78,668. That's it. For being the most watched, most talked about, and most marketable athlete in the country, she's earning what amounts to a mid-level office job. Put it this way, her yearly salary is about what some professional athletes in other leagues spend on a single weekend vacation. Now keep that number in your head and compare it to the value she's generating. Independent economic studies have shown that Caitlin Clark is directly responsible for an estimated $36 million impact on the league and its partners. $36 million. That's not hype. That's not speculation. That's measurable dollars flowing in because of her presence. Let's break it down even further. For every single dollar the WNBA pays her, she returns more than $460 in value. Stop and think about that ratio. If a business hired an employee and got a 4-to-1 return, that'd be incredible. If they got a 10-to-1 return, it'd be historic. But over 400-to-1? That's not just profitable, that's exploitative. And the most disturbing part? This isn't hidden behind closed doors. It isn't some secret contract detail buried in fine print. It's happening right out in the open, and everyone can see it. The league, the fans, the sponsors, they all know exactly how much she's worth, and they all know exactly how little she's being paid. This isn't a gap. It isn't even a gulf. It's a financial canyon one so wide it makes every other debate about pay in professional sports look small by comparison. And at the center of that canyon is a rookie who, whether she wanted to or not, has become the living, breathing evidence of a system that doesn't just undervalue players, it outright disrespects them. But this story doesn't stop on spreadsheets, because the financial disparity spilling out of Caitlin Clark's contract is reshaping everything, from ticket sales to locker room chemistry, and even the balance of power between the players and the league itself. And that's where things get even more explosive.
Before Caitlin Clark stepped onto a WNBA court, the league's financial picture looked bleak. Arenas across the country were half empty on game nights, struggling to reach even 50% capacity. Broadcasters aired games that most viewers skipped, and sponsorship money trickled in at a pace that could barely sustain the league. For decades, the WNBA fought for relevance, but the reality was hard to ignore. It was a niche product with niche attention. And then, Clark arrived. Overnight, the entire landscape flipped. Suddenly, tickets for games featuring her team were selling out. Not just selling better, selling out. Seats that once sat empty for weeks at a time are now impossible to find. The impact on television has been just as dramatic. Games she plays in aren't just doing well. Ratings are spiking to levels networks could only dream of before. We're talking about a 4 times increase in viewership. 4 times! The audience. Imagine if the NFL quadrupled its ratings overnight. It would be the only thing anyone in sports media talked about. That's the kind of effect Clark is having, except she's doing it as one rookie. But it doesn't stop at ticket sales or ratings. Analysts estimate that she is directly responsible for nearly 27% of the league's total economic activity. Let that sink in. One person, one rookie, carrying more than a quarter of an entire professional sports league on her back. That's not just impressive, it's unprecedented in modern sports. To put it into perspective, imagine if LeBron James, Tom Brady, or Lionel Messi were responsible for over a quarter of their entire league's business. It sounds absurd because no single player in men's sports has ever had that level of financial gravity. And yet, in the WNBA, Caitlin Clark already does. What this reveals is something deeper than just star power. It exposes how fragile the league's economy really is. Because if one player can cause this kind of surge, what happens if she gets hurt? What happens if she leaves? What happens if the system around her fails to keep her? The WNBA has built its entire resurgence on a single foundation, and that foundation is a 22-year-old rookie. But this isn't just a financial story. The ripple effects don't end at balance sheets or TV contracts. Inside locker rooms across the league, that economic shift is sparking something much more volatile: resentment, tension, and in some cases, open hostility. And that's where the story takes its sharpest turn. Now, imagine you're a veteran player in the WNBA. You spent 10, maybe even 15 years grinding through the toughest conditions. Long bus rides because the league couldn't afford charter flights, salaries so low you needed off-season jobs just to make ends meet. Years of pushing, fighting, and hoping that one day women's basketball would finally get the recognition it deserved. And then, almost overnight, a rookie walks in and changes everything. She's bigger than the league, bigger than the game itself. The arenas are full because of her. The ratings are spiking because of her. The sponsorships are rolling in because of her. Meanwhile, you're still cashing the same small paycheck you always have, and you know the only reason people are paying attention now is because of someone who just showed up. That frustration, that resentment, isn't necessarily about Caitlin Clark the person. It's about the system, because every dollar she generates doesn't just prove her own worth. It screams from the rooftops how undervalued every player before her has been. For decades, women's basketball has been powered by black athletes who carried the league with their talent and their dedication, but who never got the recognition, the media spotlight, or the financial rewards. Caitlin Clark's success has become a mirror reflecting years of disrespect, and for some players, that truth is hard to swallow. And you can see the tension play out right on the court. The hard fouls, the extra contact, the subtle and sometimes not so subtle attempts to rough her up. It's not just perception, the numbers prove it. A stunning 17% of the league's flagrant fouls this season were committed against Caitlin Clark alone. 17%. One player being targeted more than anyone else, and the league doing little to stop it. Fans and commentators are quick to label it as jealousy. They point to the body checks, the elbows, and the extra whistles, and say the veterans can't stand her success. And on the surface, that looks true. But if you dig deeper, you realize this isn't just about envy. It's the symptom of a system that's been broken for decades. The veterans aren't angry at Clark herself. They're furious at a league that failed them, a league that left them underpaid and underappreciated, only to start cashing in the second Clark arrived. To them, she's not the problem. She's the proof of how unfair the system really is. And that's what makes this situation dangerous. Because resentment doesn't just fade away. It builds, it festers, and eventually it boils over. And as the tension in the locker room continues to grow, the players are finding their voices in a way the league can't ignore, which is exactly why the WNBA Players Association is about to turn Caitlin Clark from a rookie sensation into the most powerful bargaining chip the league has ever seen. When the Players Union looks at Caitlin Clark, they don't just see a superstar, they see leverage. For years, the WNBA has been fighting for fairer pay, better travel conditions, and a bigger slice of the revenue pie. But the league always had one weapon on its side: indifference. Ratings were modest, ticket sales were sluggish, and the league could always argue that the money simply wasn't there. Clark shattered that excuse in less than a season. She didn't just bring fans, she brought undeniable proof that women's basketball could be a booming business. Sold-out arenas, national headlines, ratings that networks actually brag about. For the first time, the union doesn't have to argue about potential. They can point to hard evidence. The league is thriving because of one player, and by extension, because of its players.
And Clark's accolades only strengthen their case. Rookie of the Year. The first rookie named to the All-WNBA First Team since 2008, a legitimate MVP candidate in her very first season. These aren't flukes, they're statements. They tell the league, our stars are world-class, our power is real, and your system has been holding us back. But here's the real danger for the league. Clark didn't ask to be a weapon, but that's exactly what she's become. The union knows she's their ace card in the upcoming collective bargaining agreement negotiations, and they are not afraid to play it. If Clark can generate this kind of wealth while earning less than 6 figures, imagine what every player is actually worth. And the timing couldn't be worse for the WNBA. The current collective bargaining agreement is expiring soon, and the next round of negotiations already has a reputation among insiders as a ticking time bomb. The players are demanding a bigger share of revenue, better contracts, and protections that reflect the value they're creating. And if those demands aren't met, the threat of a lockout in 2026 isn't just possible, it's almost certain. Think about that. The WNBA has spent years building its brand around Caitlin Clark, presenting her as the savior who would carry women's basketball into a new era. But that same player is now the union's most powerful weapon, the very tool they could use to shut the league down. The system created this paradox. Clark generates unprecedented wealth, but by doing so, she also exposes just how underpaid and undervalued every player is. And now, instead of securing the league's future, she's forcing it into its greatest crisis. And while the union gathers strength, the league office is scrambling, caught between two impossible choices: pay the players what they deserve and risk financial collapse, or hold the line and risk losing everything in a lockout. This is the moment where desperation starts to creep in, and where rumors begin to swirl that sound more like fantasy than reality. When an organization starts to panic, you can see it in the stories they allow to circulate. And right now, the WNBA looks desperate. Rumors have been spreading online about Clark being offered a so-called $50 million contract, a deal so outrageous it would completely shatter the league's salary structure. But here's the truth. That number isn't real. It's not a signed contract. It's not even a confirmed negotiation. It's the byproduct of a league staring down its own collapse, grasping at a fantasy solution. That $50 million figure is less of an offer and more of a signal, a fever dream born out of fear. It's the league's unspoken admission that they know how valuable Clark is and how dangerously fragile their system has become. They can't admit it out loud, but they know they're stuck with a problem that doesn't have an easy answer. And while the league flails, Clark herself is making moves that are far more calculated. She's not sitting quietly waiting for the system to treat her fairly. Instead, she's sending messages with every decision she makes. When Ice Cube's Big 3 League came calling with a verified $15 million offer for just a 10-week season, nearly 200 times her WNBA salary, she turned it down. When the newly formed Unrivaled League offered over $1 million for an 8-week season, she declined that too. At first glance, those decisions might look confusing. Why would anyone turn down that kind of money, especially when they're underpaid where they are? But here's the deeper truth. These weren't business rejections, they were power plays. By saying no, Clark is proving something much bigger than the numbers on the table. She's showing the WNBA that she isn't desperate, that she doesn't need to chase fast money, and that she values her platform in ways they can't control. Each rejection is another crack in the league's foundation, another reminder that their brightest star sees her worth, even if they refuse to recognize it. And with every power move she makes, the league looks weaker, more exposed, more trapped. They can't pay her what she's actually worth under the current rules, but they also can't afford to lose her to another league. Every path forward is dangerous, and Caitlin Clark knows it. But the most shocking twist, while the league scrambles to figure out her price tag, Clark herself is changing the conversation entirely. Because she's not just talking about dollars, she's talking about something far more uncomfortable: race, privilege, and the history the WNBA would rather not confront. In the middle of all the money talk, the sold-out arenas, and the skyrocketing ratings, Caitlin Clark said something that stopped everyone in their tracks. She didn't dodge it. She didn't sugarcoat it. She openly acknowledged the role that race and privilege have played in her rise. "I've earned everything I've worked for," she explained. "But as a white person, there is privilege. A lot of the players in this league who have been great have been black players. This league was built on them." Those words hit like a shockwave because they weren't just self-awareness, they were a public admission of a truth that's been hanging over women's basketball for decades. For years, black athletes carried the WNBA on their backs. They were the stars, the faces of franchises, the players who sacrificed for a league that wasn't ready to reward them. And yet, many of those same athletes never received the media attention, the sponsorships, or the fan adoration that Clark has attracted almost instantly.
And this isn't just speculation. The numbers and the coverage prove it. Black superstars led their teams to championships, won MVP awards, and dominated on the court long before Clark arrived. But the recognition never came close to the frenzy surrounding her. When Clark broke records, headlines screamed across every major outlet. When she signed autographs, crowds lined up by the thousands. When she played, fans packed into arenas like never before. The contrast was undeniable, and Clark herself wasn't afraid to say it out loud. By doing so, she didn't just silence critics who accused her of being oblivious. She positioned herself as someone who understands the bigger picture. She knows her talent is real, but she also knows that her identity has given her a platform that others, equally talented, equally deserving, never got. And that acknowledgement changes everything. Because it means Clark isn't just a pawn in the league system. She's not naive about why she's become the face of women's basketball so quickly. She knows the spotlight she carries isn't just about her skill. It's also about a cultural dynamic the league has failed to address for decades. That awareness makes her more unpredictable and far more powerful. Because now, every move she makes, every contract decision, every interview, every refusal to take outside money, carries an extra layer of meaning. She isn't just a star athlete anymore. She's a symbol, both of the WNBA's potential and of its deepest contradictions. And that's what makes the league situation even more dangerous. Because if Caitlin Clark is aware of her privilege, if she knows the system that lifted her up is the same system that held others down, then she also knows exactly how much leverage she holds, and exactly how broken the league's foundation really is. Which brings us to the breaking point, the place where economics, culture, and power collide. A moment where the WNBA must decide between survival and collapse with no safe path forward. The WNBA thought it had struck gold. They believed Caitlin Clark would be the savior who lifted women's basketball into a new era, the star who finally brought mainstream attention and long-term stability. But instead of saving the league, Clark's rise has exposed just how fragile the foundation really is. Here's the reality. The WNBA built its entire future on one player without creating a system strong enough to sustain her impact. And now, that gamble is backfired. The league is stuck in an impossible corner. On one side, they can cave to the union's demands, pay the players what they're worth, restructure the salary system, and risk destabilizing the league's finances overnight. Smaller market teams could collapse. Owners already running on thin margins could walk away. The dream of sustainable growth could implode under the weight of sudden financial pressure. On the other side, they can dig in, refuse to budge, and hold the line. But that road leads to an equally catastrophic outcome. A player lockout, maybe even in 2026, that could shut down the league entirely. And let's be clear, a lockout isn't just a minor pause. For a league still fighting for relevance, it would be a death sentence. Fans, sponsors, and networks wouldn't wait around. They'd move on, and the momentum Clark created could vanish overnight. That's the no-win scenario. Either choice pushes the league closer to collapse. And at the center of it all is the rookie they crowned as their savior. Even outside voices see the danger. Commentator Dave Portnoy went as far as to say that if Caitlin Clark ever walked away, she put the WNBA out of business in 2 years. Maybe that's exaggerated. Maybe it isn't. Because when one player generates over a quarter of your entire league's economy, it's not hyperbole, it's reality. So now the league faces the very question it never wanted to confront. What happens when your greatest asset also becomes your greatest threat? The system is broken. The trust between players and owners is gone. And Caitlin Clark, the woman meant to carry the WNBA to glory, may be the very force that tears it apart. Because she knows her worth. She knows her leverage. And if the league refuses to recognize it, she may have no choice but to walk away, leaving behind not just a broken contract, but the ruins of an entire system. And that's the cliffhanger the WNBA can't escape. Is Caitlin Clark the savior who saves the league, or the storm that destroys it?